Hello and welcome to the podcast. I hope you're doing amazing. These are my banana trees. I'm going to provide an update every week with new photos as they grow, but you get to watch them go from little sprouts to, in some cases, over 15 feet tall by the time we hit summer. So that'll be a new segment. The other thing is I want to give a shout out to the When Shit Hits the Fan podcast. Love the name. I was a guest on there a couple weeks ago. We spun this like fun wheel, answered questions. I'll leave a link in the comments and description below, but check it out. Really cool guys. And I appreciate having me on the podcast. The last thing is, man, comments are just so important on these platforms. Having interaction of any sort is just huge. So I have a request in search of a comment, like obviously baiting you to comment, but what's your favorite IDE? But let's have fun with it, right? Why is that your favorite IDE? What do you like about it? No wrong answers and no hate, but just curious, what are you using? Leave a comment and then I'll tally them up and I'll put the results of the comments into a future episode so we can see kind of what people are using. I want to share some things that I think have helped influence my success. And these came up because I've been talking to other folks who are looking for work or out of work and just in various places in their career. And this has come up a lot. So I wanted to take all of these little nuggets of advice and things that I've been talking about to other people and share them. So I decided to make the title really long: Suggestions for Long-Term Success from a Systems Perspective. Because titles are hard, but that roughly sums up the perspective of this presentation. I think originally it was just like, random opinions from a 43-year-old man, but that felt a little bit too cynical. But going back to the systems perspective thing, what I've done here is I've taken apart three things, because I like the number 3. It's a good number. We'll start with 3 things, or the first 3, that I advise doing that enhance your way of thinking to be more prone to systems thinking. It's kind of taking systems thinking and applying it to life so that you can then better apply it to your career, because it's circular, right? That I think if you think of systems as a career, your personal life, your professional life, all that's going to kind of munge together because that is the system of you. The first topic I have is the idea of feeding your portfolio. I think having a portfolio is number 1 for a reason on my list. I think it's the most important thing to have. There's some obvious reasons, there's some not obvious reasons. I'll go through that. First, I've kind of broken it down into like the fact that portfolios are awesome. And I think there's sort of 3 buckets that you can fill that awesomeness into. One is that you have an advantage in the market, just in general. I cite an example here where in an earlier episode, I talked about working for a guy named Wayne in an early job of mine, and like having the portfolio, having the binder was a big reason why he tapped me on the shoulder for that job. So number 1, you're going to get an advantage. And I think everybody's looking for an advantage. So here you go. The second one is, I think it's really difficult to explain who you are in words. I think it's way easier to show it through your work, through your documentation, through your commits, through, whatever it is, whatever shows off what you do and have a passion for, is not only going to reveal more about who you are in terms of like what you've tangibly put your hands on, but I think more importantly, it'll start to add a data points across a time bar of like, what were you interested in? What were you focusing on? What were you doing at that time? And then where did you go from there and why? I think being able to chart that can give you a better understanding as to what kind of decision-making that you're undertaking. How frequent is your decision-making? Are you right, wrong? Are you choosing the right people? All of that becomes a little bit more clear when you have a portfolio. And then last, something that comes up a lot, especially myself now that I'm in my mid-40s and I've just forgotten a lot of life, like what happened 20 years ago. Man, I'd really have to think and sit down and probably do a little digging to remember. So the problem with that is if you don't keep a portfolio, you're going to find a lot of great ideas that you've had in the past and go like, I can reuse that idea or that story in another way. So I think it's an investment into yourself that pays dividends over time. I want to drill down deeper and give you some examples. Like, how do I live what I'm talking about here? Well, one is if you go to my website, thewahlnetwork.com, there's a public speaking button in the top menu. And if you click on that, I have an event database like what I'm showing you here on the screen. And that's my way of keeping a portfolio. It's not the only way, but it's something that works well for me. And I'm going to use it as an example so that you can hopefully get some inspiration on what would work for you. But what I like about this is that since 2011, I've been keeping this dang thing for 14 years now. Everything that I've done is in here. It's all searchable because it's in a database. And here's the very end of the list. I just talked about being at scale in an earlier episode, but here it is, and other things that I've been at. You can scroll through every year and see what I've been up to. There's like hundreds of them. And so that's just nice. Like, I was digging through that while researching this episode, and I found this, a VMware user group that I was at 11 years ago. And I'm seeing like the 32-year-old version of myself. Here's me in 2014 giving a talk about the need to change and DevOps and all that kind of stuff. So I like being able to find stuff like that. And then I get to share like a goofy image of myself from the past, which is fun. So all that to say, I think it's important to have a way to track what you've been up to in whatever method you want. Do it publicly, do it privately, but have this database for reasons I'll go into further, but just for yourself is a good start. The other thing I'm going to recommend if you're a tech person is go get your GitHub looking good. You can customize the heck out of it by making custom repos in your GitHub, but I'm telling you this because I've used it in my last 3 jobs as part of the interview process. Numerous folks that I talk to who are getting jobs like in SRE world and other technical roles are literally being asked, like, do you have a GitHub profile? Yes, I do. Okay, let's go through it. And when I was hiring people to contract into my enterprise customers, all my enterprise customers, when they interviewed my contractors to come in and do consulting, they would want to see the GitHub repo, like, show me your repo. So I just think it's a good idea, even if you don't have a lot going on there, like, get it cleaned up, get it, set up. If you don't have one, make an account. Look to mine as an example. You can look at Wahl Network or you look at Chris Wahl, whichever one you want, but directly rip off what I'm doing if you like that, and then make changes to it so that it personalizes. But I just think it's important because really what you're doing is you're showing like, hey, I'm into this world. Like, this is, well, whether you like it or not, GitHub is kind of like the center of the universe in a lot of different ways. And so I think participating there is just a good idea. But the more tactical thing that I do myself and suggest doing is experiment in public. And I just have an example here of, I've got almost 20 repos in the Wahl Network organization because I like to put all of my code in Wahl Network so that, it's like obviously tied to the website and people can find it a little bit easier. And then my personal repos are really just for like goofing around. So like, this is where I put it. I don't know how much I've really figured out on my own in my life. It's always been finding someone's documentation or blog or asking for help. And I think that's a culture that is a smart idea. So I'm recommending contributing to it. And I think it's something that people recognize in one another when they see you entering this world and offering, who you are and what you do and experimenting in public. I think it identifies between people, and they're looking for people like that. These hiring managers and organizations. It shows that you're kind of into it, right? And you don't need to be told. You can build this stuff yourself. The last thing I'll recommend is whenever you create content, especially for like an event or a conference or whatever, don't just throw it there and be done with it. Have a place to own your ideas, right? Don't just have that through someone else. So as an example, I use SlideShare. Used to be independent and tied in with LinkedIn and then got bought. And I don't know, there's been a lot going on, but my account is like 11 years old on here as well. So I just have loaded all of my slides because I want you able to go back to any of my presentations ever. So I think anything that you can do that looks something like slides, whether or not it's like lucid charts you put in PDFs or something that you do visually, toss it into GitHub if you want, but have a place where people can find your ideas, find out about, what you're saying and presenting, and don't gate that behind the events and conferences and places that you go. You're going to want to own that and spread it further than that. All right, second opinion, documenting your solutions publicly. I think when you document your solutions publicly, it just forces you to really up your game when it comes to documentation. It makes you open to others giving you feedback. Like it really just, it's an uncomfortable place to be. I recognize that, but I think that discomfort will work some muscles that you didn't know you had, and is going to give you another type of competitive advantage because, yeah, right. It's easy to see what your solutions have been. You've had to make them public and get over that fear, and you'll find later on you probably want to go find these solutions that you've created. And they're not hard to find because they're public. The transparency and investment tranches remain the same. I think it's the same concept of being able to plot all of these pieces of documentation that you create, and then the investment of being able to go back and remember what you did. Just as an example here on my website, my earliest blog post is from 2010 in November. I was really into group policy and Microsoft stuff back then, but isn't it interesting just to be able to go back to time like that? So I just think having that longer tail of information becomes more and more relevant for that, data points of how things have changed. And just for fun, I looked up like what was the most popular day or month on the blog, and it was 2014 in August, because August was when VMworld always was, and I think I got like 15,000 people on the site that day. Definitely got an email from my hosting provider. They were not happy. The other thing I've talked about, I think on a newsletter article in the last month or so, was how I'm using Notebook LM as an AI to go through all this stuff. So I'll say that's another advantage that's more recently popped up, is the idea to point AI at your body of work, your portfolio, your documentation, both, whatever. And then something like Notebook LM just sort of says, all right, cool. Now I have a fully searchable index across all of this data and can make you this weird podcast with two AIs talking to one another. So nice benefit. Last reason, I just feel like if you're documenting your solutions, that means you're coming up with solutions, you're solving problems, whether or not it was flawless or you had mistakes along the way. And that sort of success is typically contagious, right? It attracts other people that are looking to do similar things, either to follow in your footsteps or to validate your footsteps. But either way, you got to have those footsteps somewhere. My last opinion is the idea of maintaining a single source of truth, capitalized single source of truth. And this is where I think we come around to the beginning again. If we live sort of a systems structured and systems thinking kind of life, then that's going to bleed into what we do in our work. And so I think having this concept very deeply rooted of a single source of truth allows you to maintain that balance and consistency when you apply it professionally and personally. It means that you have pretty clear goals in mind. You have your priorities straight. You're not kind of conflicting between two different paths. You've made your decision. I think the better you have a handle on that, the better that you can pivot and understand when those things change, when your goals are met or not going to be met or need to be changed, whatever. Life is a very dynamic thing, and it's going to come at you every day at a slightly different angle. And so I think maintaining something like a single source of truth as a mental model helps you glue all that together a little bit. I also wanted to make a fun flag type slide, so here you go. But I think the key outcome that's desired with a single source of truth is making good decisions, making informed decisions. And I think that when I really sat down and kind of break that down, I'm like, well, I think that, again, we have that translation. You're thinking single source of truth everywhere. And so scale becomes more successful, both personally and professionally. If you're rooting in that single source of truth, you can automate more, you can configure more because you have a deterministic system. And so it's just much easier to deal with. I also think it's just advantageous in general. Again, how do you get an advantage in your career in life? I think systems thinking gives you an advantage because you're constantly going to be exercising the muscle of critical thinking. Comprehending a system's way of life, of thinking, of patterns recognition, et cetera, requires a lot of critical thinking in order to comprehend. And therefore, it's just going to become second nature to think that way. Something like that. Third one, I don't think anyone's going to argue that ambiguity is the enemy. So the best way I found to avoid the, don't do anything option, there's always change, don't change. Don't change is easier. So avoiding that means getting rid of ambiguity, facing things that are unknown, questioning them, coming to a point where you have a better understanding of what's going on with ambiguity, means that you're able to solve it. I don't know. And then I don't know, clear lines, clean lines. Just sort of a concept of woodworking and doing home renovations for many decades. You always want a plumb line. You always want to think through end to end. What are you doing? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to know that you're doing it right? So kind of woodworking even sneaks into this a little bit. And I think the way that flows out of you to further that advantage is, how do you communicate and how do you exercise intentionality? Where do you focus? What do you prioritize? Because only when you think end to end through a system, like you would when you're trying to make sure you've got clean, clear lines in your architecture or your woodworking, means that you know, like, what's along the path, who's on the way, right? How many studs are we going through? Like, who's being interrupted here? And that's going to translate into quality communications that are at the scale that they need to be, and informing the stakeholders that need to be informed and bringing them in the right ways. So just a lot of good benefits snowball out of that. All right, there we go. Those are some thoughts. Hopefully they help. I mean, let me know if they do. Again, comments, love them. But otherwise, appreciate you being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week, and let's talk again soon. Peace and love.